Meanwhile, Wendy, Michael, and John have come to love their home under the ground, especially Wendy. It consisted of one big room with a floor in which you could dig if you wanted to go fishing. There were mushrooms, which they used for stools, and a big fireplace. It was all especially entrancing to Wendy because those boys of hers gave her so much to do. She cooked and sewed and darned, and there were whole weeks when she was never above ground. There are so many adventures that one completely loses track of time. There was the time, for instance, that Peter saved Tiger Lily from drowning at the hands of Captain Hook. Hook and his men had held the Indian princess captive, with feet and ankles tied, and left her on Marooner's Rock to perish. So happened that day that Peter and Wendy were swimming in the lagoon near Marooner's Rock, and as the pirate ship approached, Peter thought of a scheme. He would imitate the voice of Captain Hook. The real Hook was in the water also. Without their seeing him, Peter ordered the pirates on board the ship to let Tiger Lily go free. You see, Peter was very good at imitating voices, among other things. Had it not been so, when the tide rose, Tiger Lily would have submerged and drowned. Oh, there were many adventures, and there were stories, too. Wendy told the boys a different story every night before they went to bed. One night, she told them an awfully good story about a mother, Mrs. Darling she was called, a father, Mr. Darling he was called, and their 3 children.
Now, boys, these 3 children had a faithful nurse called Nana, but Mr. Darling was angry with her and chained her up in the yard. So all the children flew away. They flew away to the Neverland where the lost children are. Now, I want you to consider the feelings of the unhappy parents with all their children flown away. They waited and waited, and never did they once close the window of the children's nursery. The window is still standing open. And do the children go back? What do you think, Michael? You see, our heroine knew that the mother would always leave the window open for her children to fly back in. So they stayed away for years and had a lovely time. But then they felt that so great indeed was their faith in a mother's love that they could stay away no longer.
Wendy, are you sure mothers are like that?
I'm sure, John.
Wendy, let's go home.
Let's go home tonight, Wendy. At once. Tonight. Peter, will you make the necessary arrangements?
If you wish it. I'll ask the Redskins to guide you through the wood. Then, Tinker Bell, you will take them across the sea.
But alas, it was at this moment the pirates made their dreadful attack upon the Redskins. It is something we cannot describe, because it was a massacre rather than a fight. Only a few of the tribe survived. It was the happy hunting grounds for most of them. But the work of the pirates was not yet over. For it was not the Redskins Hook had come out to destroy. It was Peter Pan he wanted, Pan and Wendy and their band, but chiefly Peter Pan. Meanwhile, in the home under the ground...
If the Redskins have won, they'll beat the tom-tom. That is their sign of victory.
Listening at the holes above in the trees were the pirates. Silently motioning with his hands, Hook ordered Smee to beat the tom-tom. Down below, Peter and his mates hear...
The tom-tom! It's an Indian victory!
And no sooner had the children heard this than they said their goodbyes to Peter and left, going one by one up the trees. And one by one, they were plucked from the trees and made captive by the pirates. They were tied to keep them from flying away, doubled up with their knees close to their ears. Hook then gave the order to take the children to the ship while he stayed behind. For Hook was seeking Peter, and nothing could stop him from taking him this time. Underground he went, and when his eyes became accustomed to the dim light, his greedy gaze rested on the great bed. On the bed lay Peter, fast asleep. But when Hook moved toward him, he discovered an obstacle. The door of Michael's tree stood in his way. He rattled it. He flung himself against it, but he could not open it. But what was that? His eye had caught sight of Peter's medicine standing on a ledge within easy reach. Right away he knew that the sleeping boy was in his power. Hook always carried a dreadful drug in his pocket, a most powerful poison, which he would use rather than be taken alive. 5 drops of this he now added to Peter's cup. Then one long last look at his victim, and turning, he wormed his way back up the tree and stole away. Peter slept on until...
Who is that? Who are you? I won't open until you speak.
Let me in, Peter.
Tink, what is it?
Oh, you could never guess.
Out with it, Tinker Bell.
And then Tink told Peter what had happened.
I must rescue them. I must rescue Wendy. But first, I must take my medicine. Wendy will be mad if she finds out I haven't taken my medicine.
No, don't. It's poisoned.
What, poisoned? Who could have poisoned it?
Hook.
Don't be silly. How could Hook have got down here?
This Tink could not explain, nor would Peter admit to falling asleep. He raised the cup. With one of her lightning movements, Tink got between his lips and the poisonous liquid and drained it to the dregs.
Why, Tink, how dare you drink my medicine?
But Tink did not answer. Already she was reeling in the air.
What's the matter with you?
It was poison, Peter. And now I'm going to be dead.
Oh, Tink, did you drink it to save me?
Yes.
But Tink's wings would scarcely carry her now. She tottered, then lay down on the bed. Every moment her light was growing fainter. Peter knew that if it went out, she would be no more. She liked his tears so much that she put out her beautiful finger and let them run over it. Her voice was so low that at first he couldn't make out what she was saying.
I believe I could get well if children believed in fairies.
Peter flung out his arms. There were no children there, and it was nighttime. But he decided to speak to all the boys and girls who might be dreaming of the Neverland.
Do you believe? If you believe, clap your hands. If you believe in fairies, don't let Tink die. That's it. Clap your hands. You believe in fairies? Don't let Tink die.
Many clapped. Many of you who were nearer to Peter and the Neverland than you think clapped. And Tink was saved. First, her voice grew strong. Then she popped out of bed. Then she was flashing through the room more merry and impudent than ever. Said Peter,
Now to rescue Wendy.
Peter, crawling forward like a snake, his dagger at the ready, approaches the green light, squinting over Kidd's Creek, marking where the brig, the Jolly Roger, lies low in the water. Hook treads the deck, deep in thought. This, he thinks, is his hour of triumph. Peter is removed forever from his path, and all the other boys are on the brig, about to walk the plank.
So, my beauty, you ought to see your children walk the plank.
Are they to die?
They are.
Oh.
Hook, smiling his evil smile, took a step toward Wendy. His intention was to turn her face so that she should see the boys walking the plank one by one. But he never reached her. He never heard the cry of anguish he hoped to wring from her. He heard something else instead. It was the terrible tick-tick of the crocodile. They all hear it. Pirates, boys, Wendy. It was very frightful to see the change that came over Hook. He fell in a little heap. The crowd gathered round, all eyes away from the thing that was coming aboard. They had no thought of fighting it. It was fate. Only when Hook was hidden from them did the boys' curiosity get the better of them. To the ship's side they rushed just in time to see the crocodile climbing up it. Then they got the strangest surprise of this night of nights. For it was no crocodile that was coming to their aid. It was Peter. It was at this moment that the quartermaster emerged from the forecastle and came along the deck. As Peter, with dagger in hand, came aboard. John clapped his hands on the ill-fated pirate's mouth to stifle his warning cry, and in one movement, Peter rushed from behind, casting the pirate overboard. One splash, then silence. None too soon, Peter on tiptoe vanished into the cabin. Hook, thinking the crocodile had gone its way, drew himself up firmly to full height.
Then here's to Johnny Plank. Do you want a touch of the cat before you walk the plank, little ones?
No!
Fetch the cat, mate. It's in the cabin.
The cabin, thought the children. Peter is in the cabin. As the mate strode into the cabin, they followed him with their eyes. And then, from the cabin, the dreadful screech that wailed through the ship and died away. Then was heard a sound which was well understood by the boys. Something terrible was in there, reported one of the pirates. Something that had gagged the mate and thrown him overboard.
Who will bring me that doodle-doo?
From the crew, only cries of mutiny, cries of mercy.
I'll bring out that doodle-doo myself, then.
And so saying, Hook sped into the cabin.
But wait, lads. Here's a notion. Open the cabin door and drive them in, the boys. If they kill him, we're so much the better. If he kills them, we're none the worse.
The pirates devotedly did his bidding. The boys, pretending to struggle, were pushed into the cabin and the door closed on them.
Now listen.
Inside, Peter had found the thing for which he had gone in search. The key that would free the children of their manacles. First, Peter cut Wendy's bonds, and then nothing could have been easier than for them all to fly off together. But for one thing, Peter's oath. Hook or me this time. The pirates, thinking something evil had happened to the boys in the cabin, were panic-stricken. Said Hook,
Lads, I thought it out. There's a Jonah aboard. No, never was luck on a pirate ship with a woman on board. We'll right the ship when she's gone. Fling the girl overboard! There's none can save you now, missy.
There's one.
Who's that?
Peter Pan the Avenger.
and as he spoke, Peter flung off his cloak. Then they all knew it was he in the cabin all along. In that frightful moment, I think Hook's fierce heart broke at last.
Put up your swords, boys. This man is mine,
Cried Peter, suddenly face to face with Hook.
So, Pan, this is all you're doing.
I, James Hook, it is all my doing.
Proud and insolent youth, prepare to meet your doom.
Without more words, they fell to fighting. Peter darting in and out, parrying with dazzling rapidity. Hook's
Come on,
thrusts were
Pan.
again and again turned aside. Then Peter, lunging fiercely, pierced Hook in the ribs. The sword fell from Hook's hand. He was at Peter's mercy. One more thrust from Peter's dagger, and thus perished James Hook. Wendy, of course, had stood by, taking no part in the fight, though watching Peter with glistening eyes. She praised all her boys equally, and then she took them into Hook's cabin and pointed to the watch which was hanging on a nail.
How late it is. You see? Here, now you must go to bed in the pirates' bunks. Quickly now.
And all went to bed, all but Peter, who strutted up and down on deck until at last he fell asleep and dreamed marvelous dreams. Since we're all just lookers-on as fights are waged and won, and Peter Pan becomes the victor, let's become onlookers at the nursery so long ago left by Wendy and her warriors. The only change to be seen is that Nana's kennel is no longer there. When the children flew away, Mr. Darling felt in his bones that all the blame was his for having chained Nana up. In his remorse, he vowed that he would never leave the kennel until his children came back. Might have been silly, but it was also a magnificent gesture of humility. On this evening, we find Mrs. Darling in the night nursery, awaiting Mr. Darling's return home. She's very sad. She is dozing in her chair, dreaming perhaps. Suppose to make her happy, we whisper to her that the children are coming back. They're really within 2 miles of the window now, flying strong. Mrs. Darling, your children are on their way home to you. Getting up from her chair, awakened out of her dreams, she opens the nursery window. For the window must be left open for the children always, always. Back to her dream. But it is not Wendy and John and Michael who fly into the room. It is Peter and Tinker Bell.
Quick, Tink. Close the window. Bar it. That's right. Now you and I must get away by the door, and when Wendy comes, she'll think her mother has barred her out, and she'll have to go back with me.
Obviously, this plan has been in Peter's mind all the while. Otherwise, he would have left Tink to escort the children home. But on leaving, Peter says to himself,
She's awfully fond of Wendy. Well, I'm fond of her, too, and we both can't have Wendy. Oh, all right, I'll open the silly window. We don't want any silly mothers. Come on, Tink.
And he flew away. Thus, Wendy and John and Michael found the window open for them after all, which, of course, was more than they deserved.
Let us creep in and put our hands over her eyes.
No, John. Let us all slip into our beds and be there when she sees us, just as if we had never been away.
So, when Mrs. Darling opened her eyes, all the beds were occupied. She saw them, but she did not believe they were there. You see, she saw them in their beds so often in her dreams, she thought she was still dreaming.
Mother!
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 For a long time, Mrs. Darling could not speak. Then she wakes Mr. Darling, now sleeping in the kennel, to share her happiness. Nana came rushing in. There could not have been a lovelier sight. But there was none to see it, except a strange boy who was staring in at the window. He had fun and joy that other children can never know. But he was looking through the window at the one joy from which he must be forever barred. Peter did see Wendy once again before he flew away. She told Peter that her mother had adopted all the other boys and would like to adopt him also.
But you'd send me to school, and then to an office. And soon I should be a man. And I don't want to go to school and learn all those serious things. I don't want to be a man.
However, Mrs. Darling did make him this handsome offer. She would let Wendy go to him for a week every year to do his spring cleaning. And this promise sent Peter away quite gay again. And so it was that Peter came for Wendy at the end of the first year. But he did not come the next year. The next spring cleaning he did come. And that was the last time the girl Wendy saw him. The years came and went without bringing the careless boy. And when they met again, Wendy was a married woman and by then had a daughter of her own. Her name was Jane. And when she was old enough to ask questions, her questions were mostly about Peter Pan. And sure enough, one night when Wendy came into the nursery, she found Peter sitting on the bedpost, crowing gloriously. And Jane stood by his side with a look on her face that Peter liked to see on ladies when they gazed at him.
Goodbye, Wendy.
Goodbye, Peter.
And as he rose in the air, Jane rose with him. It was already her easiest way of moving about. Wendy rushed to the window.
No, no!
It's spring cleaning time, Wendy. And I want Jane always to do my spring cleaning.
Oh, if only I could go with you, Peter.
You see, Wendy, you can't fly.
And of course, in the end, Wendy let them fly away together. Our last glimpse of her is at the window, watching them receding in the sky until they were as small as stars. This happens every spring cleaning time, for Jane, then her children, and then her children's children. And thus it will go on, so long as children are gay and innocent and heartless.